Welcome back to Outside Views, and bro, we need to talk. And today we're diving into a topic that has not only defined the last decade of British life, but has utterly, fundamentally, and I would argue tragically, reshaped the trajectory of British politics. I'm talking about the profound, enduring, and divisive legacy of Brexit again. The political landscape of the UK is not just changed, it's been warped, and the aftershocks of the 2016 referendum are still the primary fault lines running through the entire system, even after the chaos of the 2024 general election. The sheer instability of recent British politics is staggering, and yet it's all perfectly explainable through the lens of one single event. Before 2016, British politics was already trending towards instability. Voters were becoming more volatile, more willing to switch parties, and the classic alignment of social class with the two major parties was slowly fading. The working class was drifting from Labour, and the entire system was becoming fragmented. And then came the EU referendum, a political earthquake that didn't just rattle the system, it re-engineered it. The referendum forced a massive, accelerated realignment of the British electorate. And this wasn't about the economy anymore. It was about the second dimension of politics, a competition over deeply held liberal versus authoritarian values. Immigration, national identity, and global versus local priorities became the new axis of power. Positions on Europe became the key marker, cutting across traditional class lines and pitting two new, distinct groups against each other. The younger and more educated voters, who were largely pro-Remain, against the older and less educated, who were largely pro-Leave. And crucially, this new alignment initially seemed to stabilize the system, but only in the most cynical and forced way. The two elections that followed the referendum, 2017 and 2019, saw voters sorting themselves ruthlessly based on their Brexit preference. The Conservatives, by aggressively repositioning themselves as the unambiguous pro-Leave party that promised to get Brexit done, became the sole mobilizer of the Leave vote. Labour, meanwhile, appealed more to Remainers, even with quite a confused message. And this created a temporary artificial stability. The two major parties swallowed up nearly all the smaller party support, reaching levels not seen for decades. Brexit had, for a moment, arrested the long-term trend of fragmentation. But this stability was a mirage built on single-issue fever. And now we look at the results of the 2024 general election, and the chaos seems to have returned with a vengeance. The stability is completely gone. The 2024 election was, by some measures, the most volatile ever in British history, with over 40% of voters switching parties between 2019 and 2024. The two-party vote share, Labour and Conservative combined, plummeted to its smallest share since the 1960s, a paltry 59%. And this is a shocking level of fragmentation and a complete reversal of the 2017 and 2019 elections. The Conservative Party, the political vehicle for Brexit, saw its support utterly collapse, winning only 23.7% of the vote. Labour won a landslide victory in Parliament, which might suggest a clean sweep or a clear public mandate. But they did so with a mere 33.6% of the vote, revealing their profound failure to unite the anti-Brexit side of the equation. Brexit itself was barely mentioned in the campaign. The issues were competence, the cost of living crisis, and high inflation. So, did the Brexit realignment die with the issues? Absolutely not. The genius, and I use that word with heavy sarcasm here, of the Brexit realignment is that it lives on, not through individual parties, but through party blocs. The extensive analysis shows that despite the unprecedented volatility and fragmentation of the 2024 vote, political competition is still split on the same fundamental Brexit lines. Voters are simply moving around inside the two bubbles that Brexit created. And we have two distinct party blocs in British politics. The right Conservative bloc, which is the political home of Leave support, consisting of the Conservatives and the radically right-wing Reform UK party. The left Liberal bloc, which is the political home of Remain support, including Labour, the Liberal Democrats, the Greens and the various nationalist parties. Well, and data proves that when Conservative voters abandoned the party in 2024, they didn't flood over to Labour or the Liberal Democrats. No, the vast majority of those defectors switched to Reform UK, so they stayed within their right Conservative bloc. They dumped the failing Conservative brand, but clung fast to the fundamental Leave preference. The social conservatism, the anti-immigration, the lower tax, the small state ideology that the Brexit vote has come to represent. And likewise, Labour's gains and losses were overwhelmingly within the left Liberal bloc, swapping voters with the Liberal Democrats and the Greens. And this is the key. The volatility in 2024 was overwhelmingly intra-bloc switching, not inter-bloc switching. Between 2019 and 2024, the switching within the blocs, like Tory to Reform or Lib Dem to Labour, skyrocketed. But the switching between the blocs, like Labour to Reform or Conservative to Lib Dem, stayed constant. This means the ideological wall that Brexit built is still standing, stronger than ever. The consequence is that the demographics that underpinned the Leave-Remain split, namely age and education, remain the strongest predictors of political choice. An older, less educated voter is highly likely to be in the right Conservative bloc, even if they bounce between the Tories and Reform, while a younger, more educated voter remains anchored in the left Liberal bloc. And these demographic divides are now substantially stronger predictors of vote choice than they were before the referendum. Brexit has permanently hardwired cultural and social values into the British party system. It has taken a long-term trend, the decline of class voting and the rise of the liberal authoritarian divide, and accelerated it into an unbreakable structural reality. This persistence of the blocs, even when the issues of EU membership is no longer salient, is proof of the long-term damage of Brexit. It was more than just a vote to leave. It was an electoral shock that created new political identities, effectively turning Leave and Remain into pseudo-party labels that voters now use to orient themselves. The Conservative Party, by embracing Leave, permanently damaged its reputation for competence in the eyes of the other half of the electorate. Its current collapse is linked to immediate failures like the COVID scandals, the inflationary crisis, and the disastrous 2022 mini-budget. But the fundamental reason these failures cost them so much is that they lost the economic class anchor and relied too heavily on the Brexit identity for survival. When they failed, their voters didn't go to the opposition. They simply moved to a more authentic pro-Leave option in the same political bubble. In fact, if you look at the support for the right Conservative bloc amongst Leave voters over the entire last decades, it's incredibly consistent. When the Conservatives were seen as ambivalent on Brexit, Leave voters flocked to UKIP or the Brexit Party. When the Conservatives were aggressively pro-Brexit in 2019, they flocked back. When the Conservatives imploded after 2019, they went to Reform UK. The loyalty is not to the Conservative Party. The loyalty is to the bloc and the ideology that Brexit amplified. But after all of this, where does this leave British politics? It leaves it in a state of permanent structured fragmentation. They now have a multi-party system where volatility is high, but the ideological boundaries are rigid. The political debate is no longer about which party has the best economic plan. It's about which side of the cultural divide you belong to and which party within your chosen bloc can best deliver your side of the bargain. And this is a deeply unproductive, frustrating, and frankly dangerous form of politics. It makes building a broad national consensus virtually impossible because every issue from the NHS to energy policy can be reinterpreted and weaponized through the lens of those two hostile Brexit-defined camps. And I don't want to edit here because I want to stay in my flow and not cool down here. Because let's also not forget Scotland, where the Brexit division interacts with the question of independence, adding a layer of complexity and fragmentation that further destabilizes the entire union. The SNP and their supporters are firmly in the left liberal bloc, very left from my point of view, but their ultimate goal is not a new government in Westminster, it's separation. And Brexit didn't just happen. It has reshaped the foundations of democratic contest in the UK. It has killed the old class politics and replaced it with a tribal cultural war that pits younger, urban, educated liberal citizens against older, non-urban, less educated conservative citizens. The problem is that the economic reality of the country, the need for growth, investment and better public services, cannot be solved by just moving voters between two ideologically similar parties in hostile camps. The UK is now stuck in a cycle of high volatility within fixed, uncompromising blocs. This is the long-term political cost of that single terrible decision in 2016. It's an election system permanently damaged, forced to play out on a narrow, frustrating and ultimately self-defeating pitch. So thanks for watching this on Outside Views, and I'm really looking forward to your opinion on that topic. And if you want to see another video right now, the next one is right here in the end screen. I'll see you there. I'll be back.